All right, it's Free for All After Party. For now, anyway.
For now.
That's what we're going to call this thing. There'll be a new name we're unveiling soon. Mike
Hard
Doocy
launch.
with Sam Gannon. You see us every night, hopefully, on Free for All on Fox 4, 10:30 during the week, and 10 o'clock on Sunday nights. And I talk a lot about how radio is where I came from in this business, but a lot of people don't know that was probably your first broadcast gig too, right?
It was. Well, in college, I used to have an entertainment show, and I called it The Scoop with Slam and Sammy because I've always, edgy. I've always loved the entertainment side of things, and sports is a form of entertainment. So I had my college radio show, and then the first internship, and I think I've told you this, the first internship I ever did in broadcast was for an entertainment show in the morning in Boston called Maddie in the Morning. It was this guy, Maddie and Billy Costa, they're both household names. Maddie retired, but I was Billy Costa's intern. And at the time, he was living in my hometown. And I'm like, oh, he's going to be hard to reach. I'm going to write him a letter because my brother was friends with his son. Wrote him a letter, said how much I wanted to intern for him. He called me once during the spring semester, and he offered me an internship. And I was in there 3 days a week at 5 a.m. And I would clip any of the entertainment sports clips, headlines. And it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot from that. It was fun. So yeah, radio has always been something that I've enjoyed too.
Did the wacky morning show reference you on the air?
A couple times, yes. Yeah. Yep, a couple times. So that always kind of made my morning, you know?
Well, I went to a small private college my freshman year. Thought I wanted to teach and coach as a profession. But then I always kind of had broadcasting in the back of my mind, got the job at the student radio station. The bug bit me there, and I transferred to Iowa, and I was lucky enough to get a job back in my hometown, like the summer between my sophomore and junior year at a radio station that had just gone on the air. And picture a prototypical small-town Iowa radio station where the studio was literally out in the middle of a cornfield.
Oh, my God.
And you'd have to go walk out there, and you get your third-class FCC license and sign the thing on the air and turn the transmitter on. And I was the only one in the studio from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Saturday and Sunday. I ran the thing.
Were you
this
nervous?
guy gave me at first, but then I'm just trying to
And you were like, I
keep
got
the thing on the air.
my
I'm the chief
mojo.
engineer, I'm the announcer, and everything. So it was a great experience. And
So
then,
you were technically inclined back then. I don't know how
yeah, how could that
You are
possibly
now.
have been the case?
How many times are you calling me over to help?
What does this button on the keyboard do? What's this ESC button mean? So radio was my thing exclusively for my first 6 or 7 years in the biz, and then had a chance to move over into TV. So that's a long way of saying we think these microphones are really cool.
They are.
And, for those of you who are just listening and not watching, we'll try to be a little radio-y here for you. Congrats to the ticket, by the way. Marconi, major market radio station.
Were we
of the
surprised
year.
at this point?
I think surprised in that sports stations never won it, supposedly, and a DFW radio
in this
stations never
particular-
won it.
Oh, I didn't realize
they've never
that.
won for its top station regardless of format.
Oh, because they always win.
Yeah, they've
Marconi
won
Awards,
top
right?
sports station a lot.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
But so they're going up against music stations and these traditional news talk stations, and I just get such a kick out of it because they signed on the air about the time that I came here, and they've just been such a grab ass station for so long, and now they're this esteemed, nationally award winning station.
And why don't you tell the people what you tweeted out when you congratulated them?
I congratulated my teammates from the ticket, and I said sources tell me that the air check the judges used was from the morning I was on there, and Gordon and I were talking about suppositories.
The fourth muser, he gets
won
some credit too.
Yeah, I'm on there a half dozen times a year, so I figure I kind of put him over the top. So congrats again to the ticket. So you went to Pittsburgh and had quite an eventful time. Man, that was a wacky Sunday night, wasn't it?
You know, I'm never going to forget that because I think Dak became the first quarterback to score a touchdown on a Sunday or over 2 days or something like that.
Speaking, yeah, that's right.
It was just so bizarre because we heard the weather was going to be not great, but I'm thinking, okay, maybe at worst it'll be a 20-minute rain delay. Well, then the lightning is striking everywhere and all the media folks, we have nothing to do. So we're just, of course, shooting with each other and just hanging out. But then it turned out to be an hour and a half. And the thing that I found so funny was watching these Steelers fans. Some of them obviously have had some beverages throughout the night.
Yeah, you think?
There was this one guy who just made it his mission to stay out there for the entirety of the weather delay. He's drinking his beer, putting his hands out. Yeah. And the other, finally, he got escorted to get under something, a tarp. But it was wacky. And I wasn't really feeling that confident about this team throughout the entire night. And then we saw what happened with that game-winning drive.
Yeah. And, Dak had the 3 turnovers. We all know that. 2 in the red zone. He got a little bit of that glazed look in his eye that he gets sometimes when things start to go bad. But again, to his credit, the game was still there for the taking. Really more to the Dallas defense's credit. They were able to hold Pittsburgh in check, and Dak drove them down the field 70 yards with less than 5 minutes to go. So he turns it in from what would have been a horribly disappointing loss. I think kind of an inexcusable loss, again, given the way the Dallas defense stepped up. The fact that, Fields just wasn't that good for Pittsburgh that night. They weren't moving the ball. So that would have been a terrible loss for the Cowboys and for Dak. But he turned it into a victory. And it's kind of back-to-back road wins now where nobody was terribly excited in the fan base coming out of them. But they're suddenly 3-2 and haven't won a home game yet. So there are worse things, right?
Yeah, because last year they couldn't win on the road, and now it's the reverse. Now they haven't won a game at home. And I was texting you throughout that game saying, even if they squeak by, I'm still going to feel the same way. But I ate my words with that. I do feel a little bit differently about this team coming off of that win, especially because I think Dak proved to himself, forget anyone else, that he's capable of leading this team on a very clutch 5-minute drive, win the game. Found another budding contributor in Jalen Tolbert. I mean, I think a game like that, especially for Tolbert, even more so than Dak, is so beneficial because that's such a confidence builder. And when you're still looking at this offense with Brandon Cooks being out, Tolbert raved about Cooks, saying how much that's his guy and his mentor. They need other guys besides CD, besides Ferguson, to play an integral role in this offense.
Just so many weird moments came from that game. The weather ahead of time, and we want to tell people in a minute who you met during the weather delay. I love this story. But then the whole Tolbert, I chuckled when you mentioned Tolbert because the play before the game winner, of course, he got hit in the crotch.
Yeah, where the sun don't shine.
Exactly. Or as Tyler Smith called it, his effing nuts, as he said in the post game. And so then Jerry was asked on the fan about it, and talked about.
Let's play that bite, can we?
Can we? Here we go. Yeah. Jerry.
Tyler Smith was talking about Tolbert, and he said, I'm going to read you the quote here, he sprained his nuts. How do you sprain your nuts?
Well, again, I'm not going to really go into all of the ways. We don't have time. I mean, you can do it stepping off a curb.
Yeah.
Or you can do it at midnight.
I knew you wouldn't let us down.
Stepping off the curb.
Or at midnight.
I can identify was the stepping off the curb one. Anyway, so that was a memorable moment from that game.
The other thing before we even get to who I met, because I am going to brag about it, even though I don't have a picture, and people are going to say, oh, if you don't have a picture, you can't prove it.
Why would you lie about it?
I wouldn't lie. The other thing I think that's worth touching on is there was a miscommunication in the game between Dak and CD. And, anytime during these national broadcasts that if anything goes astray, they're going to cut to the sideline and they're going to cut to Dak and they're going to cut to CD because they did it a couple weeks ago when they lost and CD didn't have a good game. And so everyone was trying to decipher what he was saying to Dak, whether it was jump ball or the other one I've been seeing a lot, subpar throw. And Micah and Trayvon Diggs were talking about this on Micah's podcast, basically saying people were making too big of a deal about it, which is fair to an extent. CD said after, he goes, me and Dak are fine. And I personally like seeing this now because in recent years, I don't know that we've seen guys be as animated with this team as we have. I think it's a good sign because what it's showing is you have two guys who care. Dak wasn't really acknowledging him in that moment, but I like it. I think it's healthy. You're going to have that in a football game. It doesn't mean they're enemies, but frustration is going to happen on the sidelines during a game.
I disagree to a certain extent because I think the quarterback's the quarterback and other guys need to know their place. And I'm not sure CD always does, and I don't think he was necessarily calling him out.
Yeah.
But it's not beyond CD to do that. I don't think you show your quarterback up like that on the sideline. And I think if I'm Dak, I take only so much of that.
What
and
Dak,
I go
though?
up and get right in his face.
What if it's on Dak?
I don't.
You don't think it's in CD's right to vocalize when he's the number one receiver?
How often is Dak going to jump down CD's throat?
Well, he would have. Sure. It would be his right to.
Yeah, I guess. I think it's, and maybe not to go back into old man, the old man phase here. I just have a hard time ever seeing Irvin confront Aikman like that on a sideline. And believe it or not, Troy missed one or two throws in his time. And admit it. It would be weird to think about that.
But these guys aren't.
Or maybe Randy Moss did that to Brady once in a while. I don't know.
I just think it's a different era too. I just think this team personality.
But is it a better era? That's next. Or not.
Here goes Mike. You have any idea, guys, how much I have to hear from Mike? The good old days, which basically he's implying these days are CRAP.
No, the good old days weren't always good. That's for sure.
And the good old days, might I add, weren't so good for women in the industry. And now things are turning.
Absolutely. No, now women co-host nightly local sports shows. Yay. And wacky podcasts where we're just kind of naturally conversing, unscripted.
This is what the people want.
There's no word machine here.
No,
Where's the word machine?
Whatever. And here's the thing. As this thing gets going, we're going to start asking you guys, what do you want us to talk about? Sometimes
I don't really care.
Sometimes it won't have anything to do with sports.
I don't really care what they want. Damn it. I'm going to give them what I want. Tell people who you met before the game. Speaking of cultural icons, you met one.
He's a national treasure. I think that's fair to say. As I saw someone say, he's literally everywhere. He was at the Olympics doing segments with Martha Stewart. I'm talking about Snoop D-O-double-G, the Snoop Dogg, who has many a hits, rap hits, during my time, especially in high school coming up. And if you don't know, he's a diehard Steelers fan, and he was on the field pregame. You could tell soaking it in, Cowboys fans cheering, Steelers fans cheering. So I didn't bombard him there. I was like, I'm just going to admire him from afar because for me, I think that's cool enough. When you see like a really big name, I just think it's cool to be able to say, oh, he was right there. So, all the reporters, we sit up in the press box. It's usually one of the highest points in the stadium. So they always feed us, and I was going to get my dinner, and I was quite hungry because I didn't eat lunch. And
what'd you get?
I got a little Italian sandwich. It was very good. So I'm walking out, pretend I'm walking out towards you, and I all of a sudden see Snoop in front of me with his posse of people, and I'm walking, I go, hey, Snoop, and he's like, give me some of that sandwich. And then we both started laughing.
So what was I don't want to read too much into this.
Right.
But what was the tone of his voice? I mean, was it kind of seedy?
No, it wasn't seedy. No? He just said it in a funny way. That's what someone was saying. He's like, oh, he didn't want a sandwich. He wanted a sandwich. I'm like, oh, my God. Do we have to go there? Why can't just an organic moment be an innocent, organic moment?
Because it's just not as much fun as
imagining
it's something else.
So I went back to my seat. I immediately tell my cousin, because she loves Snoop, she goes, oh my God, I'm so jealous.
Yeah, that's cool.
And really, so it didn't matter. Forget about getting out of that stadium at about 2 a.m. I didn't care because my night was made.
Was he loaded? Could you tell? I don't mean loaded with money.
I know what you mean. I couldn't tell, but I wouldn't surprise.
Buzzed on the doobies.
It wouldn't surprise me if he was a little high. I mean, that's kind of his thing.
Really? Okay. Well, it's a free country.
Yeah.
So that's who Sam met before the Steelers game.
It was great.
That's cool.
Yeah, we had fun.
Yeah, Cowboys now, as we say, way back to sports, go against a very good Detroit team on Sunday at AT&T Stadium. It's funny. I think we're kind of unfair sometimes in the way we evaluate the Cowboys because going into the Steelers game is like, man, this is a tough test. On the road, good Pittsburgh team, good defense, young quarterback who's been. Then they win. It's like, well, but it's Pittsburgh and it's what's his name playing quarterback who didn't play that well.
It's an unfair standard.
Whatever. But now This looks like a very good Detroit team.
3-1.
Prove. Lost that controversial game at the end of the year last year. As you pointed out on TV the other night, the last home game the Cowboys won was that December game against Detroit last year. The Lions run the ball really well. They got a couple of good runners, got a good offensive line. I think Goff is a really solid quarterback. They can be explosive offensively. Hutchinson's a great pass rusher. He had like 4.5 sacks in their last game. They're coming off a bye. So the Cowboys are home underdogs. I think it's a fascinating matchup.
I think it'll feel like a playoff game, to be honest. That's what it felt like a year ago when they won, and they easily could have lost that game. I think, and we did say this about the Steelers game, it's a tough test, and they won, and people are like, oh, well, whatever, it's the Steelers. But I think with this NFC matchup, this will tell us a lot. I think this will gauge exactly where they are in the NFC. And I think, as we said, at some point, you've got to win at home, and I think they have something offensively with Rico Dowdle now. I do. He's another guy having that kind of breakout game. And Mike McCarthy referenced this, that through the first 4 games, he thought he was rushing it a little bit, but he showed more patience in his runs. If he can be a legitimate threat in the passing game now, that just makes him even more dynamic and adds depth to that offense too. So I'm really intrigued to see what happens.
I thought that was interesting what McCarthy said, because a lot of times as a casual fan, you don't think about the fact that these guys have to wait for their blocks.
Yeah.
And you hear that term, but when you really look, not that I look at a lot of film, but when you look at some of this stuff in slow motion, you're like, oh yeah, that's right. I mean, you can't be too anxious as a runner. And Dowdle's just a really explosive, energetic guy.
Jerry called him a violent runner.
Yeah, a violent runner.
His compliment, though.
Sometimes it's got to be just slightly delayed violence. But as we've talked about on the TV show, I wanted to see Dowdle as more of the featured back. So I think if he can, the health is a big thing with him as well. And if he can stay healthy enough to be effective, that could be a difference maker in the Cowboys backfield. I still wouldn't mind Dalvin Cook out there at some point just to see what he can do.
At this point, let's see, he either has it or he doesn't, right? One or two things are going to be going to happen. He's going to be washed up, as people say he is, or he's going to show that he still has something to contribute. Yeah. So what are we waiting on at this point?
I think the Pittsburgh win was so big in that now you can afford to lose the Detroit game, and it's not going to be the sky is falling. You're going to be 3-3 at the bye week. Just psychologically, the difference between 3-3 and 2-4 with San Francisco.
Even 3-2 and 2-3.
Yeah. So, and I think even a loss to Detroit now, again, not the end of the world heading into the bye.
And don't you think it just relieves a little bit of stress for Mike McCarthy? I mean, he's always going to be stressed every week, and because it's about wins in this league. But from his own psyche standpoint, going back home and getting that kind of win in that dramatic fashion, where historically those games have always come down to the final play, and he comes out on top with his family there and all of that. Every week we're talking about Mike McCarthy's job security. So now they're in the position where they could be up 4-2. 4-2 it could be their record by the bye. That's a good place. That's a good place to be. You're right in the mix.
How about McCarthy taking Dak back to meet the parents?
I love that.
That was fantastic.
I loved that. I thought that was really cool, because they went to his dad's bar initially?
And I think they met there. Some of the players did, and then they went to the home of McCarthy's parents, and the group photo with family members. It's a lot of people who you could tell were related to Mike McCarthy. Just kind of the salt of the earth Pittsburgh folks. I really enjoyed seeing that.
It'd be fun to kind of go to your house, when you have your family get-togethers, and kind of, I could kind of come over.
Or I could just have my life and not have to worry about always being, it's always public eye. You just get tired of it. Sometimes you need some of your own private time.
I keep bugging Mike because I think this was before COVID. Oh, no, maybe it was during COVID. Mike had us over for a little pool party, and that was like 4 years ago, and it hasn't happened since. So. Well, Mike doesn't want to bond outside of work anymore.
It was all the repairs we had to do to the house after we let you guys in. It was a little rough. Do you want to talk a little Mavs before we go here?
Do it. Let's talk.
Since that's your jam, as the kids say.
My jam.
Probably, if you're going to rate them, NBA is your favorite, right?
Yeah, I'll come out and
NBA,
say.
NFL,
I don't know, but when I say that too, it's like people are like, "Oh, we knew that." No, it's not. Like it's 1A and 1B for me. I would say NBA, NFL, but it's my background. It's where I'm from. It's where I went to school.
And you covered the NBA.
I did
in Oklahoma City.
very
You were like a
extensively.
beat reporter for the Thunder, basically, with the TV station there. You spent so much time out there. As we record this, Klay Thompson's going to play in his first exhibition game. Man, I had some Doritos before we recorded this, and I'm fighting some burpage
Little
here,
snack.
so excuse me.
Just tell us when we need to take a pause.
We'll be fine. Chris in the studio here, but I think it's really fun in that both of the wintertime teams, so to speak, are both among the short list of favorites to win their championships, Mavs and Stars. I mean, looking at the morning news this morning, I think they did their Stars predictions, and 2 of the 3 columnists or whatever predicted the Stars to go to the Stanley Cup final and 1 to win it. And I think
It's fair.
the Mavs are going to be, because obviously they went to the finals last year. They
Their
fortified
team
the
got
roster.
better.
Yeah.
Much
And
better.
I think the West is kind of there for the taking a little bit. You never know who's going to get better as the season goes on, but it does take me back to a few years where, the Mavs and the Stars were always expected to go deep into the playoffs, and we're kind of back there. So that's a lot of fun.
I keep going, not to go back to the past, but this past summer, it was so much fun. The fact that both of those teams were in the Western Conference Finals at the same time. We basically had a game every night, and Jeff was our guy. Jeff Kolb was on the Stars beat for the entirety of that playoff run, and so to have him doing that, you and I got to go to Boston for the finals together too. I just think it is there for the taking. It's obviously a long season. Health plays a big part. I think if you're the Mavs, you want to try to secure a top 4 seed so you have some home court advantage there. I think they are capable of doing that. And you mentioned Klay. He talked about at Media Days a couple weeks ago that for him, this is probably going to be the biggest preseason of his career because this is the only other team now. This is his second team he's ever played on. So in terms of getting that chemistry down, it'll come along. I'm sure they're going to, you have to ease into it a little bit. But to have a threat like him, I think he's on a little bit of a redemption season for him too.
Dinwiddie's back. He's, I think, a really useful utility guy to have. Had a chance to sit down with him at Media Day. Sam did all the big interviews, Klay and Luka and Kyrie.
I
so
told
I
Mike
got
he
to
could
sit
have.
down with Spencer Dinwiddie.
Mike.
No, he was great.
Yeah.
He's a really good talker.
He's a really intelligent guy, and I think he gets it. And for a lot of these guys, Klay included, to be part of a team that is a legitimate contender again, how can you not be excited about that at this point in your career?
I had to sit down with Luka a few years ago at Media Day. That was like 11 questions, 11 one-word answers. It was like 45 seconds. All right, thanks for your time.
Mike is traumatized from that interview now.
I said, Sam, why don't you take your best shot with Mr. Doncic, and you did a much better job. He opened up to you.
He opened up a little bit, and I think that's the thing you have to remember. Some of the superstars, they're not going to be necessarily the best talkers, but I do think Luka has come along. I actually think his first finals appearance, where he had to do so much media availability, and then having a little bit more of a break, I think you're starting to see more of his personality come out.
And we're lucky to have the personalities in this market right now that we do. Again, Luka is a little shy, and I think part of it's still a little bit of the language thing. But Kyrie, we all know
He's
he loves
great.
the sound of his own voice, and I think Klay is a really thoughtful guy.
He is.
as we said. So a couple of the faces of the Mavs there, and you look at the Cowboys, love it or hate it, Micah Parsons is always going to say what he's on his mind.
And I appreciate, I do. And I know I've said I didn't like the fact that he had Darius Slay on. I understand that these guys are going to do what they want. I just think being the position that he's in, I love the fact that he says what he wants, though. Make no mistake about it.
And Dak, kind of toes the company line, but he always talks, and we always appreciate him.
Yeah.
And the baseball players never really talk. So
I mean, think about if we were in their position. I know for a fact that there would be some times where I would probably pop off.
I think there'd be days where I'd just say, what the hell? I'm going to tear down my $3.5 million house so I can make room for a new one.
Dak
God
tore
almighty.
down his house in Prosper and is building a new one.
That's that video, that TMZ
A new
video
contract.
of Dak running to watch it. It's crazy.
That's that new contract money, that $60 million a
Good
year
for
money.
him. And for him, the downside is every single time he has a rough game, social media blowing up. Oh, so that's 60 million? That's 60 million? That's 60 million?
He gets it more than any other quarterback.
Right. And for the record, we've talked about this a lot. I think by and large, a franchise is lucky to have a Dak Prescott as their quarterback, but we all know he has to prove it when it really counts. All right. Anything else? You want to give a prediction for the game? Why not?
You can do it. Let's do it.
All right. What do you got?
You want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
I do have Cowboys
Okay.
In a high-scoring game. I think 34-30 Dallas. I think Dak will bounce back, and they'll finally win a home game.
I'm going to say they're not going to put up quite as many points. I'm going 27-23 Dallas. I don't think that they're going to turn it over as many times as we saw them turn it over. I think the comfort of being home coming off the game that we saw early Monday morning, I think they finally get it together. The offense gets it going a little faster, so I have Cowboys on top.
All right, free-for-all every night at 10:30 during the week, and then at 10 on Sunday nights. And what is this, podcast kind of thing? Is that what they call it, a podcast?
We're kind of, we've got
fun.
Cameras everywhere, so you can address whatever you want.
Good night, everybody.
This is Mike's dream after he was basically forced to do this.
Good night. It was my idea. Bye.